I'm Michael Chen. I'm 32 years old, and at what was supposed to be a peaceful family Thanksgiving dinner, I discovered my father had been hiding the $5 million inheritance my grandfather left me, secretly giving control of his entire company to my golden child brother. Before I tell you how I unraveled a conspiracy of lies and took back everything that was stolen from me, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can travel. The whole thing started, as these family disasters often do, with the pretense of love and gratitude. It was Thanksgiving. The entire Chen clan was assembled at my grandmother Gloria's sprawling estate in a wealthy Chicago suburb. The air inside was warm, thick with the scent of roast turkey, sage stuffing, and my mother's overpowering floral perfume, a scent I'd always associated with social anxiety and the desperate need to impress. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American dream. My father, Robert Chen, sat at the head of the long, polished dining table, a king in his castle, beaming with a satisfaction that never quite reached his eyes. My mother, Helen, was a whirlwind of practiced grace, flitting between guests, refilling wine glasses. Her smile stretched just a little too tight at the corners. And then, holding court at the center of it all, was my younger brother, Andrew, the golden child, the chosen one. He was in the middle of some loud, obviously embellished story about closing a huge deal in Miami, and my parents were lapping it up, their faces glowing with adoration. And me? I was the ghost at the feast, the responsible son, the one who had done everything right, the Wharton MBA, the grueling hours at a respectable financial firm, yet was somehow still on the outside looking in. I was working 80-hour weeks just to pay off my mountain of student loan debt and make rent on a cramped apartment, while Andrew, who had skated through life on charm and our parents' money, was supposedly the CEO of our family's company, Chen Enterprises. He had the Porsche, the downtown condo, the tailor-made suits. I had ambition and a negative net worth. The tension in the room was a physical thing, a knot in my gut that tightened with every one of Andrew's booming laughs. I tried to make small talk, but my words felt hollow. Before we even sat down to eat, Andrew had cornered me by the fireplace. "Mikey," he said, slinging an arm around my shoulder that felt more like an anchor than a gesture of affection. "Heard you're still slaving away at that little firm. You ever gonna get a real job?" He laughed, a loud, braying sound, and clapped me on the back before swaggering off to grab a drink, leaving me standing there feeling about 2 inches tall. That was the appetizer. The main course of humiliation was yet to come. My grandmother, Gloria, had been watching all of this. She's a traditional woman, quiet and observant, but there's a formidable sharpness in her eyes that misses nothing. I saw her watching me during Andrew's little performance, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Throughout the dinner, her gaze darted between me, my father, and my mother. I could see her piecing something together, a puzzle I didn't even know existed yet. Finally, during a rare lull in the conversation, after the plates had been cleared and dessert was being served, she acted. She set her fork down with a delicate but deliberate clink. She turned her full attention to me, and the entire table fell silent, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Her voice, though frail with age, was clear and strong, cut through the room. "Michael," she said, her eyes pinning me in place, "your grandfather was always so proud of your business sense. Tell me," she leaned forward slightly, "how is the company doing under your leadership?" She enunciated every word, especially the word, your. The question landed like a grenade in the center of the table. I felt a nervous laugh bubble up in my chest. It sounded loud and strange in the sudden quiet. "What company, Grandma?" I asked, genuinely confused. Silence. It wasn't just quiet. It was a physical void, a vacuum that sucked all the air out of the room. The only sound was Andrew dropping his dessert fork, the clatter against the porcelain plate echoing like a gunshot. I looked around the table. My mother's hand was clasped over her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror I'd never seen before. My father, whose face had been flush with wine and self-satisfaction, had gone a ghastly, chalky white. Andrew stared intently at his plate, refusing to look at anyone. But it was my grandmother's face that burned itself into my memory. The worry and suspicion she'd held all night dissolved into a look of pure, horrifying certainty. The fog of her son's lies had finally cleared, and what she saw was a betrayal so profound it stole the breath from her lungs. In that single, stretched-out moment of silence, I knew this wasn't a senior moment. This wasn't some harmless confusion. This was the public unraveling of a monstrous secret, a lie so large it had defined the last 3 years of my life without me even knowing it, and I was about to be dragged into the wreckage. To truly understand the depth of that silence at the dinner table, you have to understand that my entire life was a carefully constructed stage play, and I had just been handed the wrong script. In the world my parents built, there were only 2 roles. Andrew was the leading man, the one destined for the spotlight regardless of talent. I was the stagehand, the reliable, hardworking guy in the wings whose job was to make sure the star looked good. My value was measured in effort and quiet competence. His was measured in applause. This wasn't a new dynamic. It was the foundation of our family. I remember being 16, a sophomore in high school, and I decided to enter a statewide business plan competition. I poured my soul into it. For a solid month, I was a ghost in my own home, spending every waking hour after school in the library. I researched market viability, created detailed 5-year financial projections, and built a 50-page proposal for a tech startup. I practiced my pitch in front of the mirror until my voice was raw. The night before the submission, I proudly showed the finished, spiral-bound proposal to my father. He was watching a football game. He took the binder from my trembling hands, his eyes never leaving the screen. He flipped through the pages with his thumb. The sound of the paper a soft whir against the noise of the game. Couldn't have taken more than 30 seconds. "That's nice, Michael," he said, handing it back to me. He patted the binder. "Good work ethic." Then he turned back to the TV. "Hey, Andrew," he shouted up the stairs. "Come down here. Tell me about that goal you scored in the soccer game today. Your coach called. Said it was a real beauty." Andrew came clattering down the stairs, and for the next half hour, they dissected his single lucky goal. My 50-page proposal sat on the coffee table between them, untouched. I had poured my heart into that project, and my father had given it less attention than a beer commercial. I felt a familiar sting of invisibility, a feeling that became the wallpaper of my youth. It was the same story over and over. When I was 18, I got a full academic scholarship to Northwestern. My parents took me out for a quiet dinner. "Well done, son," my dad said. "Just make sure you keep those grades up." 2 years later, Andrew got into the state university, after my father made a hefty donation to the alumni fund. They threw him a huge going-away-to-college party with 100 guests. The theme was Andrew. Years later, I graduated from the Wharton School of Business with my MBA, in the top 5% of my class. My celebration was a text message from my mom. "Congrats, honey. So proud." Party popper followed by a notification from my banking app that they'd sent me $1,000. It barely covered the cost of my cap and gown. When I came home, there was no party, no banner. Just a "so, what's next?" from my dad. When Andrew graduated 2 years later with a C, average in communications, my parents bought him a brand new Porsche 911, a graduation present. When I asked my mother about the sheer disparity of it all, she just gave me that tired, placating smile. "Michael, you've always been so driven, so self-sufficient. Andrew, he just needs a little more encouragement to find his confidence." What she was really saying was, "Your success is expected, so it requires no celebration. His survival requires constant reward." So, as I sat at that Thanksgiving table, their panicked, guilty faces staring back at me, it wasn't just one question from my grandmother that hit me. It was the weight of all those years, all those dismissals, all those invisible achievements. It was the sudden, sickening realization that it wasn't just a matter of favoritism. It was something far more deliberate. The dinner imploded. My mother feigned a sudden, splitting migraine. My father, with a voice tight with fury, announced the evening was over. He ushered people out of the house with a frantic energy, shooting me a look that could have curdled milk. "We'll talk about this later," he hissed as he passed me, a threat disguised as a promise. Sleep was impossible that night. My mind was a racetrack of angry, confused thoughts. I replayed the scene over and over. The only person I could think to call was Jessica. She was my girlfriend, but she was more than that. She was my anchor to reality. As a sharp-witted financial journalist, she lived in a world of facts and evidence, a world away from the emotional fog of my family. I told her everything, the words spilling out of me in a torrent of frustration. She listened, as she always did, without interruption. When I finally ran out of steam, she didn't offer platitudes. She offered logic. "Okay, slow down," she said, her voice a calm counterpoint to my chaos. "Let's be methodical. Your grandmother, Gloria, you said she's sharp. For her to believe you were the CEO, it must have been more than a passing comment from your grandfather. It had to be something she believed was concrete. Something he told her with conviction. But why would he do that if it wasn't true?" I asked, my head throbbing. "Exactly," she said. "That's the point. Probably is true. A man like your grandfather, a self-made tycoon who built an entire company from scratch, he doesn't make casual promises about his legacy. Wills, Michael. Trusts. Legal documents. That's where the truth is. They can lie to you, but they can't lie to the law, not forever." Her words cut through my anger and gave me something solid to hold on to. A mission. Find the proof. The next day, the investigation began. But I wasn't the only one investigating. Jessica's boss, a bulldog of an editor named Stan, had caught wind of the story. Family drama at a major Chicago company was blood in the water for a journalist like him. Jessica told me about it that night, her face etched with worry. "He cornered me this morning," she said, pacing my small living room. "He wants me to dig into Chun Enterprises. He said, 'There's a story here, Park. A rich family falling apart. Find the dirt. I want an exposé.'" "What did you tell him?" I asked, my stomach twisting into a knot. "I told him I'd look into it," she said. She stopped pacing and came to sit next to me. "Michael, this is a conflict of interest a mile wide. Ethically, I should recuse myself. But you're not going to, are you?" She shook her head, a small, defiant smile on her lips. "No. Stan wants a story? Fine. I'm going to find him the biggest, truest story of his career. We'll use his resources, his access, to find the evidence we need. We're not just going to expose them, Michael. We're going to do it with undeniable proof." Her turning a professional nightmare into a strategic advantage was a moment of pure clarity for me. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. My first thought was my grandfather's old home office. My father had kept it locked since his passing, claiming it was too painful to go in. Now I saw it for what it was, a sealed crime scene. I drove to my parents' house when I knew they'd be out, my heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and determination. I found the spare key right where I remembered my grandfather showing me as a kid, taped behind a heavy volume of Shakespeare on the bookshelf. The room was a time capsule. Dust motes danced in the sliver of light from the window. The air was stale, thick with the scent of old books, leather, and his pipe tobacco. It was like he had just stepped out for a moment. My eyes scanned the room, looking for anything. My gaze landed on his old, heavy wooden desk. And in the bottom drawer, tucked beneath a stack of old, yellowed tax returns, I found it. A small, dark wood box with an ornate brass lock. My grandfather had once shown me a small, unique key. "For emergencies, Michael," he'd said with a wink. "For when you need the real map." I had that key on my keychain, a sentimental keepsake. With trembling hands, I unlocked the box. Inside, on a bed of faded red velvet, were two items: a key to a safe deposit box at a downtown bank, and a small, worn leather notebook. I opened the notebook. It was filled with my grandfather's sharp, decisive handwriting. It wasn't a diary, more of a collection of thoughts on business and life. And then I saw it. An entry from the last year of his life. "Robert's ambition has become a sickness. He sees the company as a trophy to be won, not a legacy to be nurtured. Helen, with her obsession for status, fans the flames. They see Andrew as a vessel for their own unfulfilled dreams. They would burn the whole world down to see him on a throne. I fear they will try to subvert my final wishes. I must accelerate the legacy contingency. Michael has the vision and the heart, but he will need to find his spine. It is the only thing that will stand against the storm I see coming. He must find his spine. The words seemed to lift off the page. It was a direct message, a call to arms from beyond the grave. My grandfather had seen everything. He knew, and he had been preparing me and preparing a defense for this very moment. The hunt for the truth was on. The first step in a war is to map the battlefield. For us, that meant understanding the legal landscape, and at the center of that landscape was one man. Marcus Wong, our family's lawyer for over 30 years and the executor of my grandfather's estate. He was the gatekeeper. We arranged to meet him at a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop, a place where he wouldn't be seen by his usual corporate clientele. The man who walked in looked like he had aged a decade since I'd last seen him at my grandfather's funeral. He was stooped, his skin had a grayish pallor, and his hands shook so badly he spilled coffee on the table as he sat down. "Michael," he began, his voice raspy, "it's good to see you. You're looking well." It was a blatant, clumsy lie. I looked like hell and we both knew it. I decided to forego the pleasantries. "I need a copy of my grandfather's will, Marcus. The original, notarized version." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. He began stirring his coffee with a frantic energy, his gaze fixed on the swirling liquid. "Michael, the will has been executed. Everything has been filed with the probate court. Your father is the acting chairman, as per Edward's wishes. It's all settled." "That's funny," I said, leaning forward, "because my grandmother, Edward's wife of 50 years, seems to be under the distinct impression that I am the CEO. Why would she believe that, Marcus? Did my grandfather lie to his own wife on his deathbed?" The question hung in the air, sharp and pointed. Marcus started to sweat profusely, dabbing at his forehead with a napkin. He loosened his tie, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Gloria is, she's getting on in years. She gets confused. Edward probably said something to comfort her, and she misinterpreted it. It was the company line. The same pathetic excuse my parents had used. They had coordinated their stories." Before I could press him further, Jessica leaned in, her demeanor shifting from supportive girlfriend to interrogative journalist. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but her words were like shards of ice. "Mr. Wong, I'm a financial journalist. I've covered cases of corporate fraud. I know that concealing a testamentary document, or knowingly executing a fraudulent one, isn't just unethical. It's a felony. It comes with disbarment and, in cases involving this much money, a significant prison sentence. We aren't asking you to do anything illegal. In fact, we are asking you to finally follow the law." Marcus looked up at her, and for the first time, the mask of a flustered professional fell away, revealing the raw, primal fear beneath. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice cracking. He looked around the coffee shop, as if my father might be lurking in the shadows. "You don't know what he's capable of. He knows things about me. He made it clear what would happen. I have a family, a mortgage. My daughter is in college." He stood up so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. He fumbled in his pocket, threw a crumpled $20 bill onto the table, and practically fled the coffee shop, leaving us with the bill and the suffocating stench of his terror. Walking out of there, a cold dread washed over me. My father wasn't just a greedy man. He was a bully, a blackmailer. If he could break a man like Marcus Wong, what chance did I have? Hope, however, arrived from the most unexpected of places. A few days later, an encrypted, untraceable email landed in Jessica's work inbox. The sender ID was just a string of random characters, but the subject line was a single word that made my heart leap: legacy. The message was brief and to the point. "You're asking the right questions to the wrong people. Stop looking at the will. Start looking at the books. They aren't just stealing from the company. They're killing it. Ask about the Sunshine Project. The password is the day he came to America. Attached was a password-protected zip file. I knew the date instantly. My grandfather considered his arrival in America his true birthday. I typed in the 8 digits. The file opened, revealing a trove of internal documents. Balance sheets, expense reports, private email exchanges between my father and Andrew. It was a labyrinth of numbers, but Jessica was the perfect guide. She navigated the files with a focused intensity, her brow furrowed in concentration. For almost an hour, the only sound in my apartment was the clicking of her keyboard. "Oh my God!" she finally breathed, her eyes wide. "Michael, you need to see this." She turned the laptop towards me. The Sunshine Project. It was a luxury resort development in the Bahamas that Andrew had championed as his flagship initiative. In press releases and shareholder meetings, my father had praised it as a brilliant success. The documents told a horrifically different story. The project was a money pit, a complete catastrophe. It was tens of millions over budget, mired in lawsuits with local contractors, and bleeding money every single day. But the real crime was the cover-up. The emails showed, in black and white, how my father had directed the company's CFO to systematically siphon money from the profitable, stable divisions of Chun Enterprises to prop up the failing resort. They were cooking the books on a massive scale, faking profits to hide the devastating losses, all to protect Andrew's reputation and my father's pride. It was a house of cards, a classic Ponzi scheme, using the healthy parts of the business to conceal the cancer that was eating it from the inside out. According to these numbers, the company was hemorrhaging cash at an alarming rate. It was technically insolvent. Within a year, it would be officially bankrupt. The first twist of the knife had been the betrayal. This was the second. I wasn't fighting for a stolen fortune. I was fighting for the smoking crater of what was once my grandfather's empire. The prize wasn't a crown. It was a sinking ship, and my family had handed me an anchor instead of a life raft. The identity of the anonymous sender, the legacy loyalist, consumed my thoughts. It had to be someone high up, someone with access, someone who loved my grandfather. The answer came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. A call from an unknown number. "Is this Michael Chen?" a woman's voice asked. There was a faint, hesitant familiarity to it. "Speaking. Who's this?" There was a pause. "It's Sophia. Sophia Lin." My world tilted on its axis. Sophia, my college girlfriend. Our breakup had been messy, and to make it worse, she had rebounded by dating Andrew. It was a period of my life I had tried to forget. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. "Sophia," I said, my voice tight with suspicion. "Why are you calling me?" "I think I know some things you need to hear," she said, her voice low. "I heard what happened at Thanksgiving. The story is getting around. Can we meet? Please." Every instinct screamed, "Trap." But what did I have to lose? We met at a dimly lit bar in a neighborhood neither of us frequented. She looked older, more guarded, but the intelligence in her eyes was the same. She wasn't the carefree girl I had dated. Life had clearly thrown her some punches. "I'm not proud of this," she began, refusing to meet my eyes, her hands shredding a cocktail napkin. "After we broke up, I was a mess. Dating Andrew, it was a stupid, vindictive mistake. One I've regretted for a long time." She took a fortifying sip of her drink and finally looked at me. "I was at your parents' house the weekend your grandfather passed away. I was staying in the guest room. They thought I was asleep, but I came downstairs for a glass of water, and I heard them in the kitchen. Your father, your mother, and Andrew." She described the scene with chilling clarity. "They weren't grieving, Michael. They were plotting. I heard your mother." Her voice was so cold. She said, "This is our chance. We have to do this now, to protect Andrew's future. Michael is too much like his father. He's too strong. He'll swallow Andrew whole. Your dad didn't even argue. He just said, 'I'll handle Marcus Wong.' I've had leverage on him for years, and I've already had him draft an alternative version of the will, just in case." They talked about it like they were planning a corporate merger. There was no emotion, no guilt, just strategy. The air left my lungs. To hear the cold, calculated words of their betrayal spoken aloud was like a physical blow. "Why?" I managed to croak. "Why tell me this now?" A bitter, humorless smile touched her lips. "Because after Andrew got what he wanted, after he was named CEO, he told me he needed to upgrade his life. He broke up with me in a text message, Michael. A text message. After I had supported him, coached him, even helped him write the business school application your father paid to get accepted. He is a user, enabled by your parents. This isn't just for you. This is for every person they've stepped on to get what they want. And I was one of them." Her motive wasn't altruism. It was revenge. But it was real, and her testimony was dynamite. She was a first-hand witness to the conspiracy. I left that bar with a fire raging in my chest. I had the fraudulent financials from the insider. I had the eyewitness account from Sophia. I had the key to a safe deposit box that I prayed held the final piece of the puzzle. The picture was no longer just a family drama. It was a criminal enterprise. I went home and laid it all out for Jessica. "It's time," I said, my voice hard as steel. "No more sneaking around. I'm calling for an emergency meeting of the board of directors. I'm going to burn it all down." Declaring your intention to call an emergency board meeting is the corporate equivalent of launching a nuclear missile. You press the button, and you know there's no coming back. The fallout is guaranteed. My small apartment transformed from a living space into a full-blown command center. Stacks of documents, financial printouts, and legal pads covered every surface. The air crackled with a mixture of caffeine, adrenaline, and righteous fury. Before I could face the board, I had to know what was in that safe deposit box. It was our potential silver bullet. The next morning, Jessica and I walked into the imposing marble lobby of the First National Bank of Chicago. The place was cold and silent, a temple dedicated to money and secrets. I clutched the old, ornate key in my pocket. It felt less like a keepsake now and more like a weapon. A stone-faced bank employee led us through a series of gates and finally into the vault. The massive, circular steel door, inches thick, swung open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a sterile room lined with thousands of identical, anonymous metal boxes. It was a library of secrets. He led us to number 713. He inserted the bank's key, turned it, and then stepped back. "Your turn, sir," he said. My hand was slick with sweat as I slid my grandfather's key into the second lock. It turned with a satisfying, solid click. The small metal door swung open. Inside, there was a single, thick manila envelope. It was sealed with a circle of dark red wax, stamped with the Chun family insignia, and stylized eagle. My heart hammered against my ribs as I carefully broke the seal. My grandfather was a man of tradition. This was his final, formal declaration. I pulled out the contents. There were 2 documents. The first was exactly what I had prayed for. The original, signed, and notarized last will and testament of Edward Chun. My eyes flew down the page, scanning the dense legal text. And then I found it. Paragraph 3. The language was clear, precise, and irrefutable. I bequeath the entirety of my 51% controlling interest in Chan Enterprises, along with a personal sum of $5 million, to my beloved grandson, Michael Chun. It is also my final wish and binding nomination that he succeed me as Chief Executive Officer upon my passing, to carry on the work we began together. I had to sit down on the small stool inside the vault room. I read the paragraph again and then a third time. It was real. Every suspicion, every gut feeling, every injustice I'd felt. It was all real, all validated in my grandfather's own words. A wave of dizziness washed over me. A dizzying cocktail of vindication, grief, and a white-hot rage that threatened to consume me. Jessica put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "We've got it, Michael," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We've got him." But there was a second document in the envelope, folded neatly behind the will. It was a letter, but it wasn't addressed to me. The name on the front was Marcus Wong. I unfolded it. My grandfather's sharp, familiar handwriting filled the page. "Marcus, if Michael has presented you with the key to this box, then it means my worst fears about my son have been realized. I know you are a good man, but I also know you are a cautious one. I know Robert. He is my son, and I love him, but his ambition is a cancer. I know he will use whatever means necessary to achieve his ends, including threats against you and the family you hold so dear. I cannot blame you for prioritizing their safety. Your silence is a burden I regret placing upon you. However, I did not leave you defenseless. I did not leave Michael defenseless. I prepared for this. I established a separate, irrevocable entity, the Legacy Trust, to be held in your stewardship. It is an instrument of last resort, to remain dormant unless specific conditions are met. 1. A hostile or fraudulent deviation from the terms of my stated will, or 2. A precipitous drop in the company's valuation by more than 20% in a single fiscal year due to mismanagement. Marcus, if these conditions are met, you are not just morally, but legally and contractually obligated to activate the trust. It is funded. It contains the resources necessary for Michael to protect himself and to rebuild what I have created. Know this was never a test of Michael's character. I knew his character. This is a failsafe against my son's lack of it. Do the right thing, my friend. It is my final request. The letter changed the entire game. My grandfather wasn't a gambler. He was a grandmaster playing chess 3 moves ahead, even from the grave. This wasn't a test for me. It was a trap for my father. And the financials Diane had leaked proved it. The conditions for the trust had already been met. That afternoon, I requested another meeting with Marcus Wong. This time, there was no coffee shop. I went to his polished, top-floor law office. He looked startled to see me. I didn't say a word. I simply walked to his vast mahogany desk and slid the letter across its polished surface. He read it once, his face turning a pasty white. He read it again, his hands trembling. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a complex mixture of fear, shame, and a flicker of something I hadn't seen before, relief. The weight of his silence had been crushing him. I didn't know the specifics, he stammered. I didn't know about the letter. He just told me to keep quiet, that it was for the good of the family. My father doesn't have a copy of this letter, Marcus, I said, my voice cold and even. But I do. The board of directors will have copies by the end of the day. You have a choice. You can fulfill your legal obligation as the trustee of this failsafe, or you can try to explain your inaction to a judge and the State Bar Association. The choice is yours. He sagged in his expensive leather chair, the fight completely gone from him. Tell me what you need, he said, his voice a weary whisper. The final step was the board itself. I couldn't just walk in and set off a bomb. I needed to control the blast radius. With Jessica's research, I identified 2 long-serving board members who had been personally appointed by my grandfather and were known for their fierce independence and integrity. I requested secret, off-the-record meetings with each of them. I met them separately, in quiet hotel bars. I laid out the evidence methodically. I didn't start with the will. I started with the numbers, the irrefutable proof of financial mismanagement from Diane's files. I showed them the gaping hole the Sunshine Project was burning in the company's finances. I let their anger build. Only then did I present them with the true will and a redacted copy of the letter to Marcus. Their reactions were explosive. They were shrewd, powerful people who had been lied to, manipulated, and made to look like fools for 3 years. Their fury was a powerful weapon, and I had just aimed it directly at my father. Robert will not see this coming. One of them, a stern former CO named Mrs. Albright, said, her eyes glinting with cold fury. We will approve your motion to speak at the emergency meeting. But Michael, be ready. When you light this fire, it will consume everything. The night before the meeting, I stood in my apartment, the city lights of Chicago twinkling below. The battle plan was set. The alliances were forged. Jessica stood beside me, a quiet, solid presence. He has to find his spine, I whispered, the words from my grandfather's journal echoing in my mind. You found it, Michael, she said softly, taking my hand. Now it's time to use it. The boardroom of Chun Enterprises was my father's sanctuary. Located on the 50th floor, It was a monument to his ego, all dark wood, polished chrome, and a single massive conference table that felt like a sacrificial altar. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of Lake Michigan. It was a room built to intimidate, and on that Wednesday morning, it felt like a gladiator's arena. I arrived early and took a seat at the far end of the table, a deliberate act of defiance. I wanted to see all their faces. Jessica sat in the chair directly behind me, a silent partner in the coup, her laptop open and ready. One by one, the board members filed in, their faces grim and unreadable. My allies, Mrs. Albright and Mr. Lee, gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Then my family arrived. My father strode in, all confidence and bluster, clapping one of the board members on the back. He sat at the head of the table, his rightful throne. Andrew trailed in his wake, looking sleek in a suit that probably cost more than my car. He avoided my gaze, busying himself by arranging his pen and notebook with meticulous care, a nervous tick. They thought this meeting was about a minor stock fluctuation. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. The meeting began with the usual droning formalities. Then my father, with a proud, beaming smile, gave the floor to Andrew. Andrew is going to walk us through the latest exciting developments on our flagship Sunshine project, he announced. Andrew stood up, and with the aid of a slick PowerPoint presentation, he began to spin his web of lies. He spoke of synergistic growth, leveraging core assets, and a new paradigm in luxury hospitality. It was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak, a beautiful, shimmering mirage designed to distract from the desolate wasteland of debt it truly was. He pointed to glossy photos of pristine beaches and computer-generated images of happy, wealthy guests. He was just getting to a slide about projected Q4 profits when I spoke. I didn't shout. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply cleared my throat. The sound was small, but in that room, it was a detonation. "Excuse me, Andrew," I said calmly. "I have a few questions about your projections." Andrew froze mid-sentence, the clicker still in his hand. My father's smile vanished. He shot me a look of pure venom. "Michael, we have an agenda. This is neither the time nor the place for your interruptions." "I disagree," I said, my gaze sweeping across the other board members. "I believe there is no better time or place to discuss the financial solvency of this corporation. Mrs. Albright, I believe the board approved my motion to be granted 5 minutes to speak." Mrs. Albright, my ally, fixed my father with an icy stare. "That is correct, Robert. The motion was approved. The floor belongs to Michael Chin." Checkmate. My father was trapped, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. He was outmaneuvered in his own throne room. I stood up, walked calmly to the front of the room, and handed a thin, spiral-bound file to each board member. "For your reference," I said. Jessica, on cue, synced her laptop to the massive screen at the front of the room. The idyllic beach photo vanished, replaced by the stark, brutal black and white of a balance sheet, the real one, from Diane's leaked files. "The Sunshine Project," I began, my voice clear and steady, "is not a success. It is not profitable. In fact, it is a catastrophic failure that has, to date, cost this company over $70 million in unreported losses. For the past 3 years, my father and my brother have been perpetrating a systematic fraud, illegally siphoning funds from the profitable divisions of Chun Enterprises to cover up this disaster and mislead this board and our shareholders." The room erupted. Board members gasped, shuffling through the files I'd given them, their faces a mixture of shock and fury. "This is an outrage," my father roared, leaping to his feet and slamming his fist on the table so hard the water glasses rattled. "This is slander. He's a liar. This is nothing but a bitter, pathetic attempt at a hostile takeover by a disgruntled son who couldn't make it on his own." He was using the exact narrative they had planned, the one Sophia had overheard. It was almost sad. I let his accusations hang in the air, echoing in the stunned silence. I didn't look at him. I looked at my brother. "Andrew," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "perhaps you can help us clear this up. Could you please explain to the board this $3 million consulting fee that was paid out of the Sunshine Project's budget? It went to a Cayman Islands shell corporation, Oceanic Ventures LLC, which, according to public records, happens to be registered to your college roommate, Jason Miller. What exactly did Mr. Miller consult on to earn $3 million? Andrew's face went completely slack. The blood drained from it, leaving him looking pale and waxy. He opened his mouth, but only a small, strangled sound came out. He looked desperately at our father, his eyes wide with the sheer terror of a child who had been caught. He had been so insulated his entire life that he had no idea how to defend himself. His only move was to look to Daddy to fix it. My father saw the panic. "He's a child," he yelled, trying to shield Andrew. "He's young, he was manipulated. He made a mistake." "A $70 million mistake?" Mrs. Albright interjected, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Who manipulated him, Robert?" "You." I pressed a button on my remote. The screen changed again. "Speaking of manipulation," I said, "I'd like to play for the board a recorded deposition from Ms. Sophia Lynn, who I believe you all remember was Mr. Andrew Chen's partner for over a year. In it, she details a conversation she personally overheard 3 years ago, where my father and my mother, Helen Chen, conspired to create a fraudulent will and illegally remove me from my position as the rightful heir and CEO of this company." I hit play. Sophia's calm, clear voice filled the boardroom, recounting the cold, strategic conversation she had witnessed in the kitchen. As she spoke, a low sob came from the doorway. My mother, Helen, had slipped into the room to witness her son's triumph, only to walk into his execution. Her face crumpled in on itself, a mask of pure horror. The room was deathly quiet when the recording ended. The board stared at my father, their faces hard as stone. "And finally," I said, delivering the coup de grace, "for any lingering legal questions, I'd like to invite our family's longtime legal counsel, Mr. Marcus Wong, to say a few words." The main door to the boardroom opened, and Marcus walked in. He looked terrified, but he also looked like a man who had finally found his courage. He was holding my grandfather's letter in one hand and a copy of the true will in the other. As the legal executor of the estate of Edward Chen, Marcus began, his voice shaking but gaining strength with every word. "I have been presented with irrefutable evidence. The will that was filed with the probate court 3 years ago is a fraudulent document. The document Michael Chen holds is the one true and final will. Furthermore, I can confirm that the gross mismanagement of the company's finances has triggered the legacy trust clause, a contingency plan put in place by Edward Chen himself to protect this company from this exact scenario." It was over. The trap had sprung. My father stood frozen, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief, rage, and utter defeat. The power, the arrogance, the aura of invincibility he had worn his entire life, all of it crumbled away in that moment, leaving behind a small, pathetic, angry old man. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "You!" he finally snarled, his voice a choked whisper. "You will regret this." But the threat was hollow. It was the empty roar of a dethroned king. His reign was over. The explosion in the boardroom was spectacular, but it was just the demolition. Building something new from the rubble, I would soon learn, was a far harder, messier, and more grueling war. Victory in that room didn't mean I won the company. It just meant I had earned a ticket to the real fight. The board, reeling from the revelations, went into immediate damage control mode. In an emergency session that lasted late into the night, they made a decision that felt, at the time, like a profound injustice. Mrs. Albright delivered the news to me herself. "Michael, your case is undeniable and Robert and Andrew are finished," she said, her face etched with exhaustion. "They've been suspended indefinitely, pending a full internal and external audit. But the company is in a perilous state. Our investors are spooked, our credit lines are at risk. The board cannot, in good faith, hand the reins over to you immediately." My heart sank. "What are you saying?" "We're bringing in a neutral interim CEO," she explained. A man named Carter Hayes. He's a corporate turnaround specialist. His only job is to stabilize the ship. You will be given a newly created position, Chief Strategic Officer, and a seat on the transition committee. You'll have a voice, Michael, powerful one. But you have to prove to this board and to the market that you can lead this company out of the fire. You have to earn the CEO chair. Show us, don't just tell us. It was a bitter pill. I had the legal right, the moral right. But the business world doesn't run on morality. It runs on stability and confidence, two things Chun Enterprises had just lost. I was an unknown quantity, a ghost who had returned after 3 years. I understood their cautious logic, but it didn't stop the sting of disappointment. My father, of course, did not accept his defeat gracefully. He was a cornered animal, and he came out swinging with every weapon he had left. Stripped of his chairmanship, he immediately hired a notoriously aggressive corporate law firm and filed a multimillion-dollar lawsuit against me, the board, and Marcus Wong. The suit claimed I had used illegally obtained information to orchestrate a defamation campaign, and that my grandfather had been suffering from diminished mental capacity when he wrote his will. Simultaneously, he launched a vicious media assault. A PR firm was hired, and suddenly, insidious articles began popping up on financial news sites and in gossip columns. Chun family feud turns ugly. Disgruntled son attempts hostile takeover. Sources say, Michael Chun has history of erratic behavior. They were carefully crafted lies, painting me as a greedy, unstable usurper and my father as the benevolent patriarch trying to protect his family's legacy. Seeing my own name dragged through the mud, twisted into a caricature of everything I wasn't, was a unique form of psychological torture. This is where Jessica truly became my partner in every sense of the word. Her editor, Stan, was salivating over the drama. This is a gift from the content gods, Park, he'd barked at her. The market loves a good dynasty collapse. Run with the hostile takeover angle. It's sexier. Jessica's response was immediate. She walked into his office, I learned later, and placed her company ID on his desk. The hostile takeover angle is a lie, Stan, she said calmly. The truth is a story of corporate fraud and a son trying to reclaim his stolen birthright. If you're not interested in printing the truth, then I'm not interested in working here. She quit. For me. For the truth. The sheer weight of that sacrifice, the unwavering belief it represented, was the fuel that kept me going through the darkest days. That night, she wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my strategist, my press secretary, and my last line of defense against despair. I knew I couldn't win by fighting my father's dirty war in the press. He was a master of mudslinging. I had to win by being better, smarter. While he was paying lawyers to draft depositions, I was in the trenches. I used my new role as Chief Strategic Officer to get access to every corner of the company. I put in 20-hour days, not from a plush office, but from a small, borrowed cubicle in the engineering department. I made it my mission to talk to the people who had been ignored for years. The senior engineers who knew our tech was falling behind, the project managers who were drowning in Andrew's bureaucratic nonsense, the sales reps who knew our customers were unhappy. They were the heart of the company, and they were demoralized. They held the keys to the turnaround. They just needed someone to finally listen. Over 3 grueling weeks, fueled by coffee and a burning desire to prove my father wrong, I synthesized all their feedback. Working with Jessica, who transformed her journalistic skills into an incredible asset for corporate analysis, I built a comprehensive, ground-up turnaround plan. It was called Project Legacy. It wasn't flashy. It was a brutal, honest roadmap. Cut the hemorrhaging Sunshine project immediately. Sell off non-essential assets. Reinvest heavily in our core R&D to leapfrog the competition, and completely flatten the bloated management structure my father had built. While my father was fighting in the court of public opinion, I took my fight to the people who really mattered, the company's largest institutional investors. I secretly flew to New York and Boston, securing meetings not as the long-lost heir, but as the Chief Strategic Officer. I didn't waste their time with family drama. I walked them through Project Legacy. I showed them the numbers. I showed them a viable, exciting future for Chun Enterprises, one built on innovation, not on ego. The interim CEO, Carter Hayes, a tough, no-nonsense man, saw what I was doing. He was a pragmatist. His job was to save the company, and he didn't care who did it. He gave me the rope I needed. The real turning point came during a disastrous quarterly investor call. My father's lawsuit and the subsequent media storm had sent our stock into a nosedive. The call was a bloodbath. Carter was getting hammered with hostile questions he couldn't fully answer. In the middle of the chaos, he made a snap decision. He put his phone on mute and slid it across the table to me. "They need to hear from a Chun," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "But the right one. You know the plan better than anyone. Get on there and save my ass." My heart pounded. I took the phone. I took a deep breath. And I started talking. I didn't talk about the past. I talked about the future. I laid out the vision for Project Legacy, with a passion, clarity, and depth of detail that came from living and breathing it for weeks. I answered every single question, from the most technical financial queries to the broadest strategic concerns. When I finished, there was a long, ringing silence on the line. Then, one of the most powerful and feared fund managers on Wall Street, a man named Julian Croft, spoke up. His voice was gravelly. "That," he said slowly, "is the first time in 3 years I've heard a coherent and compelling vision for this company. That sounds like the Edward Chin I used to know. That was it. That was the moment the tide turned for good. The war wasn't won with the will. It was won on a conference call with a plan built on truth and hard work. I had finally earned my name. Took a full, brutal year. A year of 18-hour days, of endless legal depositions, of tense negotiations with banks, and of the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding a shattered company culture. My father's lawsuit, deprived of media oxygen and facing a mountain of irrefutable evidence, eventually collapsed under its own weight. He settled out of court for a fraction of his remaining shares and retreated from the business world, a bitter, defeated man. The board, watching the company's vital signs improve month after month under the direction of myself and the interim CEO, Carter Hayes, finally called the vote. The conference room was quiet this time. The decision was unanimous. I was officially named the Chief Executive Officer of Chun Enterprises. The day the press release went out, the day my name was finally on the door of the corner office, I didn't feel the triumphant elation I had spent a year dreaming about. All I felt was the almost unbearable weight of 1,000 livelihoods resting on my shoulders, and the profound exhaustion that comes after a long war. I had won. Now the real work began. My first act as CEO was to move into my grandfather's old office. My father had kept it exactly as it was, a morbid, dusty shrine. I didn't want a shrine. I wanted a workshop. I spent a weekend there myself, packing up his old belongings, not to erase him, but to make space for the future. It was in the bottom drawer of his old, heavy oak filing cabinet, a drawer that had been stuck for years, that I found it. After prying it open, I saw that it had a false bottom, and beneath that flimsy piece of wood was a single, thick envelope made of heavy, cream-colored paper. On the front, in my grandfather's strong, unmistakable handwriting, was my name. Just Michael. My hands, which had signed multi-million-dollar contracts with steady confidence that week, trembled as I opened it. The letter inside was written on his personal stationery. "My dearest Michael, if you are reading this, it means you have found your way home. It means you have fought the battle I never wanted you to face, but the one I knew in my heart was inevitable. Please know that my deepest regret is the burden I was forced to leave you. It is vital that you understand this next point. This was never a test of your character. To test something is to harbor a doubt about its quality. And Michael, I never, ever doubted you. I never doubted your intellect, your integrity, your compassion, or your strength. I saw it in you when you were just a boy, presenting me with business plans written in crayon. You were always the true heart of this family, the rightful heir to not just what I built, but why I built it. But I knew your father. I loved him as a father loves a son, but I was not blind to his flaws. I saw his deep-seated insecurity, a gnawing emptiness that he tried to fill with money and power. He masked it with arrogance. I knew that one day, That emptiness would lead him to betray my wishes, to choose the illusion of strength over the reality of his own son's worth. So I didn't set a test for you. I laid a trap for him. The legacy trust was not a challenge. It was a failsafe, a final, defensive move in a chess game I knew I would not be present to finish. I needed you to win this battle on your own terms, with your own strength, with the evidence you gathered and the alliances you forged. I needed you to take this seat not just by right of inheritance, but by right of merit, so that when you finally sat in this chair, no one in the world, least of all yourself, could ever say you didn't earn it. You are not just my heir by blood, you are my successor by character. Now the real work begins. The legacy trust, which you now have full control over, is your war chest. Contains $10 million in liquid assets. But the money is the least of it. It also contains the portfolio of patents for the energy storage technology one was developing in my final years. It is the future. It is the key to transforming this company from a manufacturing dinosaur into an innovation leader. I did not leave you a finished empire to maintain, Michael. I left you the foundation and the tools to build your own. Build it better than I did. Learn from my mistakes. Don't let the work consume the life. Live, my boy. Be happy. You have earned that above all else. With all my love and pride, Grandpa. I finished the letter and rested my forehead on the cool wood of the desk he once sat at. The tears I had choked back for a full year, through all the fights and the betrayals and the exhaustion, finally came. They weren't tears of grief or anger. They were tears of release, of a profound, bone-deep understanding that washed away all the lingering pain. He hadn't been testing me. He had been trusting me. He had been arming me. The weeks that followed were a blur of frenetic energy. The $10 million from the trust was the lifeblood the company desperately needed, allowing us to pay down debt and stabilize our finances. But as my grandfather had written, the patents were the true treasure. They were for a new type of solid-state battery technology, a revolutionary concept that was at least a decade ahead of the current market. It was the key to reinventing not just Chun enterprises, but entire industries. I threw myself into the work with a relentless, manic drive. I was possessed by my grandfather's faith in me. I was the first one in the office and the last one to leave. I lived on coffee and adrenaline. Sleep was an afterthought. Jessica would call me at midnight, her voice laced with worry, pleading with me to come home to rest. "You're going to burn yourself out, Michael," she'd say. "You won. You can breathe now." But I couldn't. I felt I had to justify his faith with every waking moment. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday night, about a month after I'd found the letter. It was nearly 3 a.m. The entire skyscraper was dark and silent, except for the lonely glow of my desk lamp. I was staring at a complex schematic for the new battery prototype, the lines and numbers blurring into an indecipherable mess. I stood up to splash some water on my face and caught my reflection in the vast, dark glass of the office window. The man staring back at me was a stranger. He was pale and gaunt, with hollowed-out eyes surrounded by dark circles. His shoulders were slumped forward under an invisible weight. And in a horrifying flash of recognition, my reflection morphed into a memory. I saw a photograph that had always sat on my grandfather's desk. Him sitting at this very desk late at night, looking exactly the same. Exhausted, driven, and utterly alone. A cold dread seized me. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A frantic, trapped bird. The air in the room grew thick, heavy. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. My grandfather's last warning screamed in my head. Don't make my mistakes. Don't let the work consume the life. I was becoming him. I was becoming the brilliant, driven workaholic whose obsession with his empire had created a chasm with his own son, planting the seeds of resentment that had led to this whole catastrophic war. I was winning the corporate battle all over again, but I was on the fast track to losing the war for my own soul. I stumbled back from the window, my legs weak. I gripped the edge of my desk to keep from falling. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't control them. It was a full-blown panic attack, a terrifying tidal wave of anxiety. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy and useless, and finally managed to dial Jessica. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with sleep. Michael? What is it? What's wrong? I can't, I gasped, the words catching in my throat as I slid into my chair. I can't become him, Jess. I can't do it. I'm on my way, she said instantly, her voice now sharp and clear and full of love. Just stay on the phone with me. Breathe, Michael. I'm on my way. That was my true moment of reckoning. Not in the boardroom, not in the courtroom, but alone in the dark, confronting the ghost of my grandfather in my own reflection. That was the night I finally understood the true meaning of his legacy. The goal wasn't just to save his company. It was to save myself from his fate. 2 years later, the view from the 50th floor is the same, but the man looking out the window is completely different. Chun Enterprises is now Chun Innovations, a leader in green energy technology. We're profitable, we're growing, and we're consistently ranked as one of the best places to work in the city. But the accomplishment I'm most proud of is that it's 6:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I'm packing my briefcase to go home. Jessica, my fiancée now, the ring still feeling new and wonderful on her finger, and I are taking a Thai cooking class tonight. I have a nasty habit of burning the curry paste, but I'm getting better. I've learned that a life, just like a business, requires balance. You can't just focus on the bottom line. You have to invest in the soul. I finally learned how to build a life, not just a resume. The shattered pieces of my family have settled in new, unexpected ways. My father is a ghost. After the lawsuit imploded, he sold his remaining shares and moved to a golf community in Florida. A bitter old man railing against the injustices of the world to anyone who will listen. We don't speak. Some betrayals are like shattered glass. You can never truly put them back together without getting cut. My mother is a work in progress. She divorced my father a year ago. Losing the status and the money that had defined her entire adult life forced her to look inward for the first time. She's in therapy. She volunteers at a local women's shelter. She sends me hesitant texts on holidays and on my birthday. I reply with a simple, "Thank you, Mom. Hope you're well." The door to that relationship isn't closed, but it's not wide open either. It's ajar. Healing, I've learned, is not a destination. It's a process. And Andrew is the story's biggest surprise. After hitting rock bottom, he left Chicago. He got sober. He got therapy. He moved to Portland and got an entry-level marketing job at a small software company. He started from scratch with no money from the family, no connections. He's earning his own way, building his own life. We talk on the phone once or twice a month. The calls used to be awkward, filled with the ghosts of everything we'd lost. But last week, he called to tell me he'd been promoted to a team lead. That's fantastic, Andrew, I said, a genuine warmth spreading through my chest. I'm really proud of you. Thanks, Mike, he said. And for the first time in my life, I believed he meant it. Maybe the greatest thing my grandfather's chaotic legacy gave us was the chance to finally become brothers. Tonight, before I left the office, I picked up the old framed photo that sits on my desk. It's the one of me and my grandfather at a Cubs game when I was 10. I'm on his shoulders, a hot dog in one hand, my face alight with pure joy. He's looking up at me, not at the game, with a smile of absolute adoration. I turned it over. On the back, in his sharp, familiar handwriting, is the note he wrote for me all those years ago. To Michael, the true heart of Chun Enterprises. Your worth was never in question, only your courage to claim it. For so long, I thought that note was a burden, a challenge I had to live up to. But now I finally understand. It wasn't a challenge at all. It was a statement of fact. Promise. He wasn't waiting for me to find my courage. He was just waiting for me to see the courage that he had seen in me all along. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it connected with you in some way. It's a long and complicated journey, but one I felt was important to share. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to fight for what was rightfully yours, not just for something material, but for your own truth and your own sense of self? I'd be honored if you'd share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments below. And of course, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next.